Now, the first elephant in the room to talk about is the fact that Call of Cthulhu actually lends itself really well to single-shot episodic adventures. It's a really great thing to play in between D&D or RuneQuest or whatever. You say, let's take a break, we'll do a Call of Cthulhu adventure. It can do campaigns, obviously, but it's not necessarily as oriented for it. In the same way that a horror short story usually pops more than a horror novel. You know, like if you read Stephen King, for example, his short stories are like way better than the novels. Or a horror movie is usually better than like a horror TV series, unless it's episodic, like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits. But if it's carried on a long thing, then often what happens with the horror TV series is that you have a couple good things at the start, then they get wound up in boring interpersonal character development that you don't care about. But you can do Call of Cthulhu, you don't have to get wound up in the character development, and you can do a campaign, but frankly, I don't think it's as easy as it is in a more normal role-playing system. So we're going to talk about how to do it. Now, those of you who have been to my How to Make a Call of Cthulhu, make a scenario the Sandy Petersen way, we're not going to do this the same way. We're actually talking about tips and tricks to making a campaign, not a scenario. So here's my first belief. Don't plan the whole thing out, because what's going to happen while you're playing, something's going to happen during the play. The players are going to come up with something cool, or you're going to come up with something cool partway through, and you're going to want to change the back half of the campaign anyway. So what you want to do first off is you get a couple punchy scenarios for the start, okay, that you think are really good, and you have an idea of where it's going to go at the end. This is going to end with Azathoth descending from the stars and melting the ice pack, or whatever you want it to be, some spectacular thing. But you can be kind of vague between now and then, because you're going to have weeks or months to play this thing out. You don't have to all in the pack. Now, first of all, you get some scenarios. You can use published scenarios. You can write your own scenarios. There's plenty of scenarios online for free. You can even have the whole campaign based on some scenario that you liked, that you thought could be expanded more on. You know, he said, well, I really like that scenario in, of course, Sandy Petersen's Abominations book. I want to do a lot more stuff with that idea. So you get that idea, and then you're going to expand out on it. Now you're going to modify these scenarios. Well, let's take this scenario. How many of you were here for the thing at 2 o'clock? Ooh, not very many. I guess maybe some of you were. So that was a single shot scenario that ended with the Migo coming to Earth and having an attack on Fort Knox with a dole coming up from below. So what you could do in that case, you could say, okay, where do we put that scenario into a campaign? And I'm thinking that it could be somewhere in the middle, or the early part. Dole comes to Earth. And then the rest of the scenario is about how to get the Doles back off of Earth. So you have a preliminary thing where the players get interested in going to find the artifact that in the scenario later on summons the Doles, as we did at 2 o'clock. This is where we get the gem, the Dole gem. Then they have the Dole scenario. Then we have to do something, and then we have a final big confrontation with, maybe in the Dreamlands, getting rid of the Doles. We haven't got them all worked out yet. We have kind of an idea of a progress of it, okay, based on the expansion of a single scenario that you kind of like. Now, this might be enough for you to do. By the time they finish playing this, you're going to have been getting ideas and things. You go, oh, I know what this should be now. We're going to put stuff in there. So you go back to here. They're going to go back to Hungary where they got the gem and something's going to happen there. And you flesh out the later scenarios based on what you've learned. Also, feel free to switch around the scenarios or just really change them. All the scenarios, even the published ones, you need to modify them to fit your players. A scenario is always better if it's tied to your players. So you've all bought scenarios from Chaosium, written by some of them possibly by me, by other authors, and they're often really good. But you should always take those and say, what are my players going to do in this situation? And based on what your players are going to do, instead of trying to shoehorn your players into the expected responses of the author who's never met your players and doesn't know what a bunch of crackpots they are, you're going to want to my guys would do this. So you modify it to react to them. My players are all gun nuts, so they're going to have to go to an auction where they get a magical gun instead of the Sword of Paracelsus, whatever it is. If you've played your campaign very long, you'll see how to do that. And even if you haven't played with these players very long, by the time you finished your first scenario, you'll have seen how they react, and you can modify it. You can take ideas and scenarios and greatly expand them so the players don't recognize them. If you want an idea for a scenario, you can literally take a movie you like, or a story you like, or someone other's scenario. Let me give you a very simple example. let's take the movie Alien. Now, imagine that you love the movie Alien, and your game takes place in 1920s America. And so what you do is you take the plot line, and the movie doesn't have to be the monster from Alien, but it's something like that, a parasite that spreads itself, okay? And you put it on a yacht off the coast of Massachusetts. Suddenly, there's modifications. The characters are stuck on a yacht, so that's kind of like the movie. They're on the ship and they can't get away. It's a big enough yacht so the thing can hide in it. They can't get at it, okay? They can try to sink the yacht. Maybe, I guess the creature can't swim. You know, that would be the equivalent of blowing up the Nostromo. But also, there's new things added to it. Because if you're doing it on a yacht off the coast of Massachusetts, you say, hey, wait, there's a new facet in this. Because if the creature gets to shore, then it's on Earth, so to speak. It gets to the humans, and it starts eating everyone in Boston. You're not just trying to escape, like in the movie, you also must make sure this thing is stopped. And as a result, as the game master say, well, to make sure the players know it has to be stopped, we're gonna have it reproducing on the boat. So there's more of them. And suddenly the whole situation is kind of a different, you kind of slopped over into Aliens as well, Alien, and you have this whole other subplot going on based simply on taking it from a spaceship to an Earth ship. It actually has possibly more depth. Maybe bad for a movie, but good for a Call of Cthulhu scenario. Okay, you can do the same thing with Frankenstein. You can say, I want to do Frankenstein, but Lovecraftian. Well, Lovecraftian Frankenstein, actually you have that in Herbert West's Reanimator.
We can defeat death.
It's essentially a Lovecraftian Frankenstein guy, right? You take that, you place it in your game as your Frankensteiner, and suddenly you have a guy going out, initially he's going out murdering people to get body parts, and then the body parts start acting on their own and doing stuff, which is the Frankenstein motif, and you have a whole cool scenario based on Frankenstein. Then you have to look at, will this fit into my campaign? Well, maybe. I might be able to work it in. One of the most famous campaigns of Call of Cthulhu is, of course, the very first one. Maybe that's why it's famous. The Shadows of Yog-Sothoth. And as the editor of Shadows of Yog-Sothoth, the guy that wrote like a third of the scenarios in it, I guarantee you that what we did took a whole bunch of unrelated scenarios that had been sent to us, and then I cobbled up some scenarios in between to make it into one whole plot. That's why the Cthulhu cult, which is supposedly about, doesn't pop in till like halfway through, because the other scenarios didn't have Cthulhu in them. So we just like did other random things. It's still counted as a campaign. Okay, now we don't want the players to get sick and tired of your campaign. Okay, so an easy way to do this, I'm gonna use a different color for that one. I gotta sniff a different aroma of dry erase markers. Okay, I was a professor teaching game design at SMU for 2 years, and of course it was video game design, but I used to dig the dry erase markers. Anyways, so what you do is you take a scenario or thing, and each adventure, you put it in a different setting. One way of thinking of good settings is to look at mystery stories. You know, like, hey, let's have this event take place in a racing stable. So imagine Herbert West in a racing stable. Well, he's gonna be cutting up horses too, right? Imagine what you can do with that. Or you can have it be during a burglary. The characters are awakened by a burglary, and then you think about what to make the burglar scary. Well, what if the burglar is a Byaki being sent by someone to pick it up? That's scary. What if it's a cultist that also wants to do a murder? What if there's all these different things you could have it be. It's your campaign, but you can fit your bad guys, whatever they are, into a burglary. If we go back to the scenario we did at 2 o'clock where we had evil Colonel Chandler and Dr. Dr. Rotz, which these names were taken from people in the audience. You can take them and say, they're breaking into your place to get something that they need. Okay, a key or something. Or, for example, what if you have it happen at a fancy cocktail party? A whole scenario at a cocktail party. You know the kind of things you could have happening there. A masked ball is really good because then you can have some revealing of something terrible under a mask. Okay, you can have it, and each scenario is one of these things. So you're like, okay, we're gonna have the racing stable, then we're gonna have the burglary in the next scenario, then we're gonna have the masked ball, then we're gonna have a vacation resort. Then they're gonna go to Disney World. Imagine the kind of terrifying Cthulhu scenarios you could have going on at Disney World. There's so many secret places in there to hide stuff. Imagine you have some of the actors at Disney World being part of a cult. It wouldn't be hard to slip them in there. So suddenly these scenarios, everyone they're playing, they're somewhere interesting and new. They're not always at Miskatonic University, or they're not always wherever your place take it. They're moving around. And they don't even have to move around. They can be in the same city doing things at these different sites. It's a gala for the new museum. It's someone's hunting things in the sewers. You got to go into the sewers. You're at a quinceanera, for a friend whose daughter's turning 15. There's so many things. Just pick a setting, and then you can fit a lot of scenarios into almost any setting. And as long as the settings keep changing out, your players are going to be gripped. So you think of the kind of settings the horror movies take place in, or murder mysteries. And this will give you, just think of a murder mystery you like, because, let's do this setting. Sometimes it can be the whole setting. I don't know if anyone saw Knives Out, the second Knives Out, which on that crazy impossible island. Well, that's a setting. Now that one might be hard for players to follow, but you could tone it down a little bit and put it there. The first Knives Out is somewhat more believable setting. Of course, the characters are crazy, but that's sort of the point. So you have these settings moving around that you take whatever scenario you got and you put them in the different places. If we go back to the movie Alien again, if you have Alien, but it's taking place at a racing stable, there's a whole different sort of stuff going on than if you have it on a boat. If you put it at Disney World, there's another element going on where you have some really blockbuster scenes. I just came up with this idea on the fly now. Each scenario, a new setting. And that keeps the players hooked. Next, we're going to talk about how to make NPCs. And if you have your campaign, you're going to need NPCs. Now, I know the stereotype of a Call of Cthulhu NPC is that he is eaten by a monster in the first scene. So this is different. So what you do is you get some characters that you know the personality of. And how do you know the personality? Because you base them on kids you knew in high school or junior high or at college, someplace before you're hanging with your current crowd. So you know this guy. As I mentioned in the previous thing, one of the characters I've used a lot is Reggie Carlson. I haven't seen Reggie Carlson in 50 years. Reggie Carlson has been used in about 20 different adventures I've done because he's my go-to guy. I know exactly what he's like, or at least what he was like, when he was 20. That's good enough. So poor Reggie has been a good guy, a bad guy, transformed into a monster, mutilated, a murder victim. But you pick this character and you know what he's like, okay? And then as the adventure goes on, you're going to need NPC characters. They're going to go to the gun store. And if you want the gun store to be more than just a place that they sell guns, you can plop the guy you knew back in high school as the guy in the gun store. Maybe he's slightly studious and nerdy. Maybe he was a bit of a jock. Maybe he couldn't get any other job and he has to work at his dad's gun store, which he hates. Doesn't matter. Now you have a character that is there in the gun store, and if they're going to be interacting with his gun store more than once, it's a useful NPC. Okay, another example. You get hurt, you have to go to the doctor. You don't want to go to the hospital because then you have to report the gunshot wound you got from the cultist. You don't want to do that. So the doctor you get is some guy that you knew in high school, that you, the game master, knew. There's a mean cop interrogating the players. Hey, the mean cop can be this guy that bullied me. And then you have a whole personality and background for this person. And then once you have a character who is interacting with the players and who has a personality, you can start looking for opportunities to bring this guy back. We're in the park running from the alien and they got loose because we had an adventure in the park during some kind of festival. We get to the road and there's a truck. We got to get away from the monster. Hey, truck, heal it. Hey, it's the guy from the gun store. Now he's a repeating character. And when you have this repeating character that has a personality, and it's an easy personality for you because you know this guy, you know just how he's going to react, or how you think he's going to react, which who cares what he really would do. It's your stereotype. Okay, now you have a character that the players will tend to fixate on. And they'll start making up their own backstories for these guys. Why is he so weird? And then you can listen to the backstories, okay? And you don't need to have a ton of these guys. Get 2, 3, 4, that's plenty. Plus there's other NPCs that won't go anywhere. Like maybe they go to the guy in the gun store and all they do is buy a gun and they never go back to the gun store. Well, we don't care if he was Reggie Carlson. Now Reggie Carlson's gonna be the old bum down in the corner that gives them some of the backstory. They'll go back to him more often. They didn't really get enough interactions with the gun store guy to know it was Reggie. So now it's this guy. And what happens is that in my campaign, in my experiences, it's players tend to fixate on these NPCs, whether they're good guys or bad guys, and that gives them more life. These guys don't have to be skilled. They can be comical, they can be stupid, they can be bullheaded. You can have them have any kind of flaws you desire, and they're still going to work in the campaign. And these NPCs have other purposes to serve. If you need a place where there's a turncoat, a guy turns bad on him, if you make up someone in scenario 2 and then he turns bad in scenario 3 because you couldn't think of anyone else to be the traitor, it's super obvious. But if you have a guy they've been with several episodes in a row, and then that guy is murdered, or that guy turns out to be a cultist, or that guy is bribed to be the cultist, or if he's interesting, like he's a bad guy, but instead of just being bad, he says, guys, I had no choice. They offered me free trips to Disney World if I killed you. Then it kind of fits within their worldview of the character and is even funnier, okay? Or you can do other things. For example, imagine that the funny guy from the pawn shop, and the players are always scamming him and getting good things out of him for cheap because he doesn't know how to rate his stuff. And everyone likes this guy because he's based on the guy that ran the candy shop near your junior high that you always scammed. Or maybe that's only me that did that, but anyway, someone like that. And then you hear that this guy is arrested and is undergone police beatings because the cops think he is guilty of the crimes that your investigators have actually been doing. Now, the players are going to be like, oh man, we should try to get old Mr. Feeney off the hook on that. But it's dangerous. Maybe it's okay to leave him there, but at least they have something to think about. Another way of reacting to poor Mr. Feeney used to be the comical guy. There's something going on with it. So remember, they're going to fixate on it. They're going to be the characters that you interact again and again. They can be unpleasant characters. And then over time, you can grow to like them. One example, we were talking about, anyone here seen the miniseries Chernobyl? So do you remember the evil apparatchik careerist that Gorbachev sends? And how you hate him at the start? By the end, you're totally in love with him? That's what I'm talking about, that kind of character. You start out not liking him, but then you love him. That's the key. But you're not trying to love him yourself. You loving the character isn't going to endear him to the players. They have to love him. So if the mean cop is beating him up at the start and interrogating him, and later on finds out that he actually has a sense of justice, he just thought you were the bad guys, the players can kind of, should we go to him? He's the only cop we know. Maybe he'll listen to us. Maybe he will, because and so the players have a character that they have a touch with. Another edge, if you're playing a campaign, it's not always convenient to add new investigators, because let's face it, in Call of Cthulhu, it's not hard to get killed or to go insane or to be transmogrified or something terrible happen to your dude. That's sort of the life in the big city for Call of Cthulhu, right? Oh no, Mark's guy just got killed. Oh well, you need a new character. So Mark's sitting there and you say, well, Mark, you could roll up some new random character and figure out how to roll him in. Or do you want to be the guy at the gun shop, that and you have a little experience with? And if you do that, that's how I get my NPCs in, by some character they know from the game that's already going on. Then at that point, you relinquish control of the character. Yeah, he was Reggie Carlson from your childhood, but now he's Mark's guy. He does them how he wants, but he has a background. He knows about the campaign. He was in the gun store. He sold him the blaster in the 40 kilowatt range, or whatever they needed to take out the monsters. So now he's someone that's tied in. He may know a little bit about the adventure or the mean cop. Want to be the mean cop? He goes, yeah, I don't mind bullying the other PCs. Those jerks got me killed, and then I can be in the adventure and still be cool. And I have a backstory of sorts. I have a personality, at least a stub of one. Now I, as a player, can flesh out, and I've got to use now if he doesn't want to be any of your NPCs, that's fine. You can try to shoehorn it in the old-fashioned way. But another thing that you can bring with that is if you're trying to shoehorn in a guy, maybe he doesn't want to be the cop, but he might want to be the cop's brother, or the cop's kid, or the cop's cousin, or the cop's boss, or his partner, and then you still have a connection to the campaign for the new character. If he doesn't want to be a cop, then he's not going to be the guy's partner, but he could be his cousin who does whatever the guy wanted to be, a Major League Baseball player. Okay, well, his brother's a Major League Baseball player, and he's been telling him about your stuff, so now you have him in the game. I had a game once where a guy wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and it was the worst job ever to get him into a scenario, because it's like, when do you have free time to go investigate Cthulhu as a baseball player? It made no sense. But the guy that ran him was one of those kind of players. So these NPCs have a million uses, and you don't, like I said, you don't need a lot. 3 NPCs you can base a whole campaign, because you're going to be throwing other NPCs all the time that come and go and do different things. But you have these ongoing guys, and like I said, then when you do something with them, it's way more important. Like now they actually want to rescue the guy because he's someone they know who's benefited in the past. Or like, even if it's a jerk, imagine the evil cop that beats him up. He's captured. Well, if you rescue him, think how much cred you're going to get with him. He's going to change. Well, he may not totally change, but he's still going to be an asshole, because that's kind of how you developed him. Okay, but he's going to be an asshole that likes you, right? And that's a big step forward for the players. Makes the campaign stronger, gives you more stuff. Okay, the trap here is that you have NPCs conversing with each other and hogging all the airspace. Don't do that. If the two NPCs are communicating, you can like bleep over it and say, they talk for a while and they argue and they get really mad and then they decide to do X. You don't have to play it out. If they're talking to a player, then of course you can do the whole thing, right? And have the guy be stupid or scammed by the players, whatever you want. But two NPCs talking is like the game master masturbating, right? So I don't believe in that. Another thing going on, if you're doing a campaign and you have interspersed scenarios, then it's possible to conceal things from the players in an interesting way. Let's say that you're running a one-shot scenario and I say, okay, you guys are gonna go on a boat ride on this guy's yacht from New York, Long Island, up to Massachusetts. The players are like, there's going to be monsters in the water or in the sky. We know what's going to happen. But if you're in a campaign, and naturally within the campaign, you say, how do you want to get to Massachusetts? Do you want to, this guy has a boat, or you can take the train, then we'll take the boat. And now you can pop something in on the boat, and they won't expect it. Because they don't know for sure it's going to be, if it's a one shot, they know it's going to be. In a campaign, they don't know that. They don't know if the thing is going to be when they get there, or whatever. So you just say, okay, you're on the boat. And then you can kind of skim around it, work around it and say, oh, it's going to take one night of travel. And during the night, suddenly your pilot's missing and there's a monster. And you go into it. And the players are then surprised. Like say that the player's rich friend, who is your NPC, who likes the players and helps them out and is hoping one day to graduate to be an actual investigator when someone dies, lends them their boat several times in the first few scenarios. Then the third scenario, you throw in my scenario, the derelict, on them. Anyone read The Derelict? Okay, it's a one-shot scenario about an iceberg and a wreck, and kind of pulls them in. And suddenly that whole boat thing, which was just like a convenient way to travel and seem rich, is now getting them in deadly danger. And of course, the other thing is like, hey, let's sail up the coast, and you can give them reasons to want to do it, to kind of gently afford them, like, there's Byaki raiding all over the land. If you go off the coast, maybe the Byaki can't get to you, and they're like, that's a good point. The NPC could even suggest it, because if the game master suggests it, the keeper, they're gonna be suspicious, because they know that you're not with their best interest in mind. Well, you are, but not the same best interest as the characters think that is. And here's the other great thing. Let's say you've got it all set up, so this adventure is going to be the derelict. Natural adventure starts. The players won't be suspicious. I don't know if any of you have got my old scenario book, The Asylum and Others. So that was originally designed to be a book of adventures you put in between other adventures. So one of them is a voyage across the Atlantic, because it's like, hey, at some point in the 20s, you're going to take a trip across the Atlantic. Throw the scenario in. There's an adventure in an asylum, because at some point one of your guys go nuts, has to be locked up in the asylum. So there's the asylum adventure, Greenwood Asylum. And then all the adventures, something like that you can just toss in. So this is what you're doing here. You're having the players do the same thing more than once. They're afraid of airplanes or Byaki or fungi, so they're gonna sail and nothing happens the first couple times. And the third time, you're all set to play the scenario, the derelict. And that time, they decide to take the train because it's faster. Not a problem. You still have the derelict in the back of your head for next time they take the boat. You're like, okay, cool. Because if you force them to take the boat, they might twig to your plot. Okay, so you go, okay, let's take the train, or you modify the derelict so it happens aboard a train. I'm not sure how the derelict would work that way, but there's something you could do aboard the train. Pull some scenario from the horror on the Orient Express. Throw that in on the train, Just rip it out of the middle of the book. The point is then, next time when they're trying to go back, and they don't want to take the train because you had the horror and the Orient Express aboard the train, hey, let's take the boat. Yeah, sure. So they're taking the boat, and now you get them with the derelict. And the point is, they don't have their antennae expecting everything is bad, and that makes it more fun for them when the boat turns into the derelict or the alien scenario, or whatever it is, okay? Now, you also want something else. I said don't plan the whole thing out, but there's some things you do want to plan out. You're going to want some showstoppers. And what I mean by a showstopper is you have a scenario, or a scene rather, that is cool, a really good situation. You see a horde of Byaki descending like a cloud of hornets onto a town, or a dole rises out of the ocean like a sea serpent. Then you have these showstopper scenes, okay? And what you want to do is pop them in every scenario or two. And they don't have to be tied to a particular scenario. Of course, you're going to work them into a scenario. So if a scenario is going a certain way, you'll say, oh, I want this showstopper scene. So you have these scenes to get players interested. And what these scenes can serve is both as a reward for finishing an adventure and a key into the next adventure. Hey, you successfully stopped the dole from rising up. Yay! And you sail away in your boat, you look back and you see the Byaki descending like a crowd of hornets on the ruins of the town where the dole was, and you go, oh crap. Then the players say, what the hell, keeper? And you say, well, next week, whenever you come back in 2 weeks, we'll have something going on then. And then you don't even know what you're gonna have then. You just know there was a bunch of Byaki or Migo descending out of the town, so you have a week to work on it and fit it into your plan. And then when the players come in, the whole cool adventure they're prepped for, they're excited about, they're kind of scared of. And so that means when you have the players excited, scared, have trepidation about your next adventure, then the players are helping you help them in the game. And those showstopper scenes do that very thing. You've all seen shows that have a cliffhanger kind of thing at the end. Just pick a cliffhanger from some show you like. One of the most overworked ones that I do not recommend is a twist of, oh, Mr. Feeney, he's actually the ghost, just like Scooby-Doo does all the time. What you want to do in Call of Cthulhu, and that you opportunity to do in Call of Cthulhu, is to blow minds. My favorite adventures are the ones where I pull something on the characters, then the characters go bananas, and the players go bananas, and the rest of the evening is lost because they're just talking to each other about it out. Let me give you an actual example from a game. Has anyone seen the movie I Married a Monster from Outer Space? Almost no one. Okay, there's a movie called I Married a Monster from Outer Space. What happens is the monsters from outer space who need women, this is apparently a criminal lack among aliens, come to Earth and they're either disintegrating or kidnapping the husbands, I forget which, and replacing them with the aliens, which look like humans. I mean, they don't really look like humans, but they are able to put the simulation humans on them for the marriage. Then the ultimate plan is they're going to take all the women in town and to go back to Jupiter or whatever with them. Every movie, no matter how terrible, has a scene worth stealing. One scene that's worth stealing, okay? So in this movie, it's a 1950s movie, so it doesn't go into great detail on the wedding night. But after the wedding night, the husband walks out on the balcony to have a cigarette or something, right? And lightning flashes. And for a second in the lightning, you can see the alien face appear. And it's pretty gruesome for a 50s alien. It doesn't look humanoid at all. And you're like, oh my gosh, what happened inside that bedroom that night? That woman doesn't know what she married. That's a really gross monster. So I stole that scene. And here's how I used it. The players had found out that in the big mansion up the hill, the evil bad guy, whom I was too embarrassed to make me Baron, I a doctor that had ran to the place, was doing awful things. There was monstrous stuff afoot. I'm not telling you what it was because I frankly don't remember. This was back in the late 1980s. But there was something terrible because what happened is the players got the town whipped up into a frenzy. We say, we got to go stop that guy. Yeah, those monsters are bad. Yeah. And so the whole town with torches and pitchforks and rake things are walking up the path to the thing like in a Frankenstein movie. And the players are like, yeah, we got this. And they're walking up the path, and I say, oh, it's a dark and stormy night. And the players, yeah, we know, boss. It's going to be a dark and stormy night. And then I take the players aside and say, when the lightning flashes, you can see the faces of all the townspeople briefly are visible as something else. Just like in the movie, they had the one guy have the whole townspeople do it. Then the players are like, they kind of go aside and says, do you think they know they're monsters? Have they always been monsters and we didn't know it? Are they only monsters recently? Have they been replaced? What's going on? Should we try to get away from them? What are they going to do when they get there if they're monsters? Are they creations of the Doctor? And the players were like, got so involved in all this worry, I didn't play out the rest of the scenario that night because it all fell apart with the players going through all the millions of possibilities, and we ran out of time. It was great. I just sat back and let them feed on each other. Okay, and then next week when they came back for the adventure, they were raring to go. They really wanted to get out of this jam. They say, if we run away, will they chase us? They had to decide what they're going to do. And so it ended on a cliffhanger of sorts that was also a showstopper. And the monsters didn't do anything except be revealed briefly in the lightning. But for the players, it was like this huge, huge deal. And there you are. You had a showstopper that made the players think, which is always a good thing. And so you can do that with almost any movie has a scene like that. For example, in Alien, you could steal the scene where Ripley is about to escape the ship and it's self-destruct, and she sees that the monster is between her and the escape hatch. So she has to go back and try to stop the self-destruct, and she fails. I mean, that's just one throwaway scene. Now, boats don't have a self-destruct switch, unless you're watching the movie Island of the Living Dead, where the boat had a self-destruct switch, which is a hilarious, terrible movie, by the way. The guy's being attacked by zombies, and he reaches up, there's a red button and a green button, and he pushes the red button, and the whole boat blows up. It's like, why does a yacht have a self-destruct? And then we started joking that the green button was the light switch. It's right next to the self-destruct switch. That whole movie is like super lame and funny. One of my favorite directors, Bruno Mattei, who is absolutely terrible, but super, super entertaining every time. So in your boat, it wouldn't have self-destruct, but they're opening the shuttlecocks to have the water come in. And at some point, the water is going to have come in too fast, and they won't be able to stop it in time before it sinks. So they see the monster in the lifeboat. They have to go back and turn on the shuttlecocks, but it takes a while to do, and they aren't there in time, and it's going to sink. We got to go back and fight the monster, and then it's gone. So they get in the boat, and then as they're sailing away, then it's in the lifeboat still, because it's on the bottom or something. It comes up. And it's just like the movie Alien. The players probably won't make the connection, because there's enough differences. It's a lifeboat, and it's water coming in, and the monster was on the outside, and of course they don't have blaster jets to trick it into, but maybe they can tie it to a anchor. Who knows? That's the player's problem to figure out how to kill the monster. You're the keeper. You don't have to worry about that. Let them worry about the solving problems. That's generally my approach in most scenarios. I set up possibilities and try to be reasonable, and then the players have to figure a way out of it. Not my concern. Because I've noticed game masters that do try to figure out how the player is supposed to do it. Then the players try to solve it the wrong way. The game masters get annoyed. It's like, dude, you're trying to make them be creative. Don't make them guess what you want. That's what terrible video games do. Make you guess what you were thinking of. So you got the showstopper, you got the old Mr. Feeney from the mill idea that you're not using, although you can if you really want to, because you haven't ever really used the guy from the gun store that much, but they know him. They've seen him like 4 times, and they gave him a ride in his truck, and maybe we can have him be a bad guy now, because it kind of fits if you think about it, because the bad guys were heavily armed. Maybe they have a team, and then when he becomes a traitor, then it's something interesting for players, if you pull it off, okay? Finally, you want to have a wow finish. You want to have the showstoppers periodically, because the players need to get that continued boost to go on with the campaign and enjoy it. And then you want to end with a huge bash at the end. I'm going to draw a nuclear explosion because, right, why not? In which the players will remember the huge deal they had at the very end and how amazing it was. And it doesn't have to be a fight. In fact, in Call of Cthulhu, it's usually not going to be a fight, right? Because fighting the monsters is not a good way. Characters that fight the monsters all the time are not characters that last for very many scenarios. Because the weakest monster in the game is a cultist. And a cultist is literally exactly as tough as a player character, an investigator, except he's better organized and more ruthless. So it's just not you can't compete with them. You got to use other ways around them. So, for example, the end of my campaign, Ghoul Island, the last scene has the characters. They have to take this 250-pound statue into the volcano where Ghatanothoa lives. It's kind of like the One Ring idea. They're dumping the statue into the lava core, which will cause the volcano to erupt. And then that will destroy Ghatanothoa or bury him under hardened lava so he's not a threat anymore. So what this means is first, they have to go through the lava tunnels to the middle of the volcano with monsters and cultists trying to stop them. And then the volcano erupts and they have to get out of the volcano while the volcano is erupting, and Ghatanothoa's thorns and sprouts and the monsters are all trying to get them to get vengeance. And so it's a difficult, scary way in through the underground tubes, then a race out with lava behind them, hoping you don't go into a dead end or a cul-de-sac with the lava. And it's a super memorable close to the campaign that the players are going to talk about. And your goal is that either, depending on who you are, either the players will want you to run the next campaign because it was so awesome, or you can beg off and say, hey, I worked really hard in that campaign. I need a break for a while. Someone else be the keeper. Either one of those, whichever fits your personality, you're in like Flynn, because you've got that stuff because they love the end of the campaign. And another good thing about it is that when you do have a spectacular end of the campaign like this, with a volcano erupting, or a nuclear bomb going off, or the whole mountainside avalanching down, or smog falling from the sky and destroying the whole city. Well, I guess Tolkien didn't end it with that. He didn't know how to end a thing right. But you do. It's going to be an obvious end. And they know the campaign's over. And if they want to do another campaign, That's fine, but it's not going to be this one because that one's over. You did it. You beat the bad guy. And if you have any surviving NPCs, which you're likely to have, they're still in your back pocket for later use in your next adventure. Heck, if you don't want to be the next keeper, the other guys can use them. Hey, you can even ask them if you're a player, say, hey, how about that gun shop owner? How about that mean cop? And you go, oh yeah, those guys, let's have them in. Because by this time they're old friends and they want to use them. So these are my advice about running the Call of Cthulhu campaign. We got about 15 minutes left if you have questions or comments or suggestions.
I guess you come to the idea of player permanent sanity or death by bringing out characters from NPC bases, or their relationships, the relationships with those NPCs, like the brother, sister, whatever. Are there any other ideas for maybe giving characters a little more, maybe more options to continue?
Well, the players have whatever options they want. If they're picking an NPC, the NPC may have some personality already, but you can also take the option I said where the NPC, like it's that guy's brother or his partner or his dad, and that way the guy can be anything they want, but he's still connected in. One technique I used it was a RuneQuest adventure. They had a ship. And so their new characters came from the ship's crew. It was like some guy in the ship would be the new character. That wouldn't work in RuneQuest and Call of Cthulhu necessarily, but it could. So that's what I've always tried to get new characters that seemed to fit. We were playing Master and Lathatep, and I had a 12-year-old Egyptian guy in the Cairo adventure who was like the translator, and he got kidnapped in the adventure, all this stuff. And then one of the characters, he didn't die. He had his face wiped or to be a blank skin, or he went insane or something like some terrible thing. Remember, this is 40 years ago. I don't have to remember it. And so his new character was the 12-year-old kid. What an interesting character to play. A 12-year-old kid who lives in the streets of Egypt, knows Egypt perfectly, but he's only 12, so he's got crappy size and strength, but everything else is top notch. He was a super interesting character for him to play. And of course, he didn't want to stay in Egypt to see his chance to go with these guys traipsing the world. He's going to head out. So it was a really cool character. So that was the thing we used. So NPCs for me have been a really good source for PCs, but not every player. So maybe the player has an idea for what he wants to be. He says, no, I really want to be a cop. And I didn't have any cop NPCs. Okay, you're a cop. To fit them in, what you can do, hey, you're a cop and you work for this precinct, and you have to investigate the stuff that was going on, and it's stuff the PCs basically did. So you have a reason to go talk to them and interrogate them, and your initial contact might be hostile, except that they know you're a player because they're sitting at the table seeing you there, investigating them, so they're going to work on ways to get you convinced that they're not crazy, and it shouldn't be too hard to convince you because you want to be in the campaign. So presto, you have a character that fits in that they never met before. And it wouldn't have to be a cop. It could be a newspaper reporter. It could be a doctor that's treating the wounds. How'd you get puncture wounds full of hydrochloric acid? Well, there was the Shoggoth Sea and whatever. But that's one way. That's one way you can get those guys in. Another question. Yes.
You rule of thumb when you're putting campaign together as far as like how lethal the campaign should be, like
I don't plan for him to die, but I have situations set up where if they make the wrong choice or they have super bad luck that they might die. A couple of times I've gone into a scenario and saying, okay, you're going into the bent pyramid that Nyarlathotep has cursed. I'm pretty sure one of you is going to die here, at least one of you, maybe more. I said that exact thing to them, okay, and it was lethal. And they went in there and they got out and they were all alive. And they were so proud of themselves that they'd escaped the game master's sentence of death that the next scenario, when two of them got killed by like a grenade fumble, they didn't even care because they survived the bent pyramid, okay? And to be frank, the grenade fumble was because one of the characters, he thought his character would go about as far as he could. So he talked to me about getting a new character. Say, yeah, we'll do it. And then when the grenade went off, he actually wasn't killed, but he was hurt. He said, oh, it's really bad. Took off your leg or something. He said, okay, I'm going to retire. You have the new character that I've already got up. And the other guy just rolled super shitty on his dice roll for the damage and then was killed. And they couldn't get into the doctor in time. And they failed the first aid. And I said, oh, well, guess you're dead. And they go, oh, well, I made it through the pyramid, though. So yeah. Mike, I guess if I had to do a rule of thumb, it would be, imagine you're telling a horror story. You're reading a horror story. Typically, one guy dies per horror story, right? So about one guy per adventure on the average. Sometimes it'll be none. Maybe it'll be none for several horror stories. Then like at the showstopper end, when they're running from the volcano or whatever you got, maybe more of them get killed there. That's okay. It's the end of the adventure. You don't need these characters anymore. But my rule of thumb is one per adventure. I was more than that in the 80s when I played it. I'm probably a little less than that now. But it might be because I've played with the same crowd of numbnuts for like 30 years. So they're on to all my tricks. Okay, next.
The idea would be applied to other tabletop games.
I'm sure they could, but I'm focused on Call of Cthulhu here. I'm sure all of these things will work on another thing. In fact, my idea of the volcano actually was used in Pathfinder, but you can see how it would work in Call of Cthulhu, right? There's a lot of things that'll work in multiple stuff. You can do Alien in the Traveler game or in Call of Cthulhu. I mean, Call of Cthulhu you probably don't put it on a spaceship, but like one of my great sources for adventures is one of my favorite games to run is based on a movie called Planet of the Vampires, which incidentally has no vampires, but it's a great movie. And I have a Call of Cthulhu adventure taking place in the year 2440, and it's based on that movie. No one expects undead in space, so it's a pretty great adventure. Yes, Arthur?
What was the movie you based when you ran that game from Madeline?
It was Al Adamson. It was Blood of Grisly Death or something. It was this terrible, terrible movie, but they had a plot that was brilliant where they had this guy that was robbing a bank. It was a guy that was dead, and it was because he'd been an atomic chip put in his brain so he'd still be alive, but he's robbing things anyway. So I took this terrible movie, and I'm not suggesting anyone see this movie, but you can base a whole plot. Another example, The Corpse Grinders is a terrible exploitation movie that just like everyone in it looks like they're seedy guys that you wouldn't want to hang out at a dive bar. Also, the plot makes no sense. They're grinding up people to make cat food, like that's cheaper, okay? But then the cats go nuts and kill people, because of course they would. But you can see how you can take a modification of this for a Call of Cthulhu adventure that is pretty cool. It's cultists doing it. They're worshiping Bast, the Bubastis, and it does some, you can see things do. You can take almost any movie, no matter how terrible, and use the plot line to do something wonderful in your game. You don't have to have the sucky actors they had. You have the awesome actors in your brain and in your players' brains, because your players are going to be playing off against your NPCs and your characters, and they're going to do things and try to prank them in ways that are highly entertaining. And usually when my characters try to prank my NPCs, I let them, because the NPCs aren't any smarter than they are, probably dumber, because I have to run a bunch of them, right? So the players, if a player has pranked an NPC or tricked them, they love the NPC more, right? So you had a question.
Okay, as my campaign has gone on, my players want more action, more things, more excitement.
Great.
They're also more terrified, and the sanity is lower, and the more they want, the less they do.
Okay, here's my answer for you. Chase scenes. They're running away from something bad. That way, their desire for action is satisfied. Because they are doing action, they're shooting over the shoulder at the Byaki. One of my campaigns that I'm publishing coming out called The Big C has a helicopter chase with Byaki. It's not an armed helicopter either. So it's a pretty exciting thing. They're trying to follow the Byaki, but the Byaki are also fighting the helicopter. So a chase scene not only makes the characters feel like it's action, but also they're trying to be safe by getting away from the bad things. So their desire to be safe is also fulfilled. And you can pull off a chase scene anywhere. Like they're in the library doing library use. And the book took a while to find. It's gonna cut into their closing. It's dark. You hear a sound, and then like a thing walks around the corner of the library and says, oh my gosh, there's a dimensional shambler in the library. And the player's like, holy crap, get my cell phone. No, I don't want to dial. I gotta run, the monster's after me. And of course, as we all know, dimensional shamblers like mess your cell phone signal. So, or if they didn't know that, they know it now. And so you got a chase scene, it's got the action they want. If they defeat the monster or they get away, either way they had action, and they also felt like they were trying to be cautious and it was forced upon them. I have no qualms about forcing an adventure upon the players if they are dragging their feet to give them more fun. Because in their heart of hearts, they want to have more fun.
Number of campaigns where whoever wrote it clearly have done a lot of research on.
But what they haven't done research on, they don't know your players.
So when you're designing a campaign, how big are you on that whole history and research?
I will look up enough history to make it entertaining. I don't look up history that's not. Usually I'll do some history. I'll look up things that have happened here. Like I did a whole scenario based on this guy, Johannes, can't think of his last name, who was a dwarf from the 1600s who had no arms, no legs, and he was able to engrave with a brush held in like between his hand and his face. And he has this whole, all these engravings he's done with super detailed stuff and words written in the corner. So I had this guy be a monster, essentially. And made up a new monster, a bibliohomunculus, which is a homunculus creature that is summoned forth by reading the book it's in. The words form it and it comes out. So I had this whole adventure base and it had a background of this guy and his history, and I used that for the players because the point of that background and history, in my thinking, is to impress the players with the cool stuff going on, not to make them think that you're erudite, though, you know, that's a side benefit, I guess. So I do research. I don't spend a ton of time because there's people that like that more than me. I look up enough to be dangerous. Or what often happens, I'll base a scenario on something that I know a lot about. So I have a scenario run based on the cyanide bank robbery in Japan in 1946 by the guy that used to be part of Unit 731 that I bring in Unit 731. And of course, it turns out Unit 731 was associated with the Chochos, and I have all this stuff happening, but I knew about that event, which let me have everything seem real to the players, which is the ultimate goal. It's all with the purpose of making fun for the players.
I have sat down to try to write scenarios several times and or campaigns, and I get really in the weeds when it comes to history, like you're talking about, and I end up getting so in the weeds that I just stop writing.
Okay, so here's the solution. Here's the solution. Don't write your own scenarios. Get a scenario from some of our source, take it and just modify it enough to fit your needs for your players. Okay, take this scenario out of Shadow of Azeroth, take this scenario out of Yogg-Sothoth, take this scenario out of Orient Express, and piece them together. They've done the groundwork for you. You don't have to. And then as you learn to see how these work and play out, you can get more into the writing and not worrying about the weeds. You just totally steal someone else's scenario. A scenario that's a one-off, you can still modify to be part of a campaign if you fit it in properly. Or you can reserve your own writing for things that don't have to have a lot of history and background. So for example, if you do the scenario that I kept talking here, which is alien is aboard your yacht, well, all you have to do background for that is like how a yacht works. And that is not going to be hours of writing. We are out of time. If you have something you want me to sign, come on up, I'll sign it.